Okay, good morning. Welcome. This is the Government Operations and Health Facilities Subcommittee of Health and Government Operations Committee. This is our first subcommittee meeting of the year, and we have 5 bills to go through today. Here in Health and Government Operations, all bills get an initial hearing. We then assign them to subcommittee so that we have a chance to look at them a bit more closely, examine them, see if they are ready for recommendation to the full committee, and at which time we return them to the full committee for a vote before they return to the floor for a second read. The members present today are Delegate Denny Taveras, Delegate Steve Johnson, Delegate Tiffany Alston, Delegate Brian Chisholm, Delegate Kathy Zulega, Delegate Ann Kaiser, Delegate Nick Kipke, Delegate Pam Gazzoni, and Delegate Leslie Lopez. That's all I see present today. We also are joined with our counsel, Lindsay Rowe, and she will help us understand the bills and answer any questions. We also invite the principal stakeholders for each bill to join us in case there are additional questions that we would need them to answer. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started with House Bill 55. This is the Maryland Commission on Veterans and Military Families with Delegate Pruski. Lindsay?
Not to mess up your bill order, but I noticed that because we had Secretary Savage here, do you want to maybe start with the Do-It bill just so that we can release her to
Yes.
go about her day?
That's a great idea. Thank you. Let's move right ahead then to HB 227. And thank you for joining us, Secretary Savage.
So this is a departmental bill from the Department of Information Technology, also known as Do-It. It makes changes to Do-It's oversight of major information technology development projects, including modifying the criteria used to determine whether a project is considered a major information technology development project, and expanding the authority of the secretary related to those projects. The bill also expressly authorizes the secretary to determine whether the information technology purchased, leased, or rented by a unit of state government is consistent with the Information Technology Master Plan, clarifies the definition of information technology, includes networking and software applications, and clarifies the definition of oversight as it pertains to Do-It's responsibilities. I circulated an amendment at about 9 a.m. this morning, so I hope that everyone got that okay. There were questions at the bill hearing about the specific language related to major information technology development projects and the fact that it was employing a little bit of a double negative. So the purpose of the amendment is just to clarify that definition as it relates to paragraph 1, which is those high dollar value project oversight. So what I sent was actually an interlineated version of the bill with the amendment language in it, so you could see how it actually reads. So that paragraph 1, again, that's the only change. It's on page 3 of the bill. It says major information technology development project means any information technology development project that meets one or more of the following criteria. And then 1 is the estimated total cost of development equals or exceeds and being increased from $1 million to $5 million. And the secretary determines that 1, the project requires the oversight given to a major information technology development project. 2, the unit of state government has sufficient implementation resources, ... 3, there's no sufficient alternative, and 4, the project will result in a single comprehensive solution. So the idea here again was not to change anything in the bill, just clarify the language that's reading right there. Delegate Curry.
Before we get to questions, Secretary Savage, anyone from your team have anything you'd like to say before we open it up to the committee?
I would like to thank Chair Kaiser and Delegate Hill for working with us on the language. As Lindsay said, it was a bit of a double negative, and so I appreciate the clarification of the language. I think it now speaks to, better speaks to our intent. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Chair Kerr. My comment or question doesn't have to do with the amendment, but more broadly, in the conversation that I was fortunate to have with the secretary the other day and some others, an explanation was made that helped me understand the bill a little better, and that might help others as well. I and so I just, for clarification, and I want to also make sure I understand it, Madam Secretary. The way I read it was, it looked like there was going to be, less supervision or oversight. And as it was explained, it's that if a $500,000 contract is super vital and small, you want to be looking at it. If it's just some continuation of something and it's 2 or 3 million and it doesn't require that. But I think, and the way it came off in the hearing made it sound like there was suddenly no oversight of big expenses, which is not what you meant. But I think, as I understand it, you described that the kind of oversight that's needed requires, I think you described like 3 staff people, and then there's a boss, and there's someone overseeing and watching the whole contract, and that some of these are just basic everyday, we bought the calculators last year, we're buying the new ones this year kind of simplicity. And so it's not a lack of oversight, it's about the constant oversight over certain kinds of projects. Is that accurate?
Exactly. What I am trying to avoid in this year's, I think it's wrapping up this year, but a great example is we have a Network Maryland project in there that's routine upgrades. And I think we're moving from leasing the circuits to buying the circuits. So that's it's a business decision. But to your point, there's the project manager on that. We've assigned an oversight manager because of the dollar threshold. So you essentially have one member of the team supervising another member of the team and both of their respective bosses, when this is really a routine operations and maintenance that we need for the network. So that's the situation that I'm trying to avoid. So that's where we have the determination, and the secretary believes that it requires oversight. Conversely, to your point, there could be a really significant artificial intelligence pilot. Or thinking prior to me, there was an interesting drone pilot that was considered for the MITDP. And those are things that are significant, and we would want, regardless of dollar value, the ability to assign an oversight manager.
So just to reiterate, every purchase is having oversight.
Yes. So every purchase still comes in through the do it intake process. So whenever an agency is embarking on an IT, really any sort of IT project or spend, it comes in through their first step is to submit a request to do it. So there's still oversight.
Okay, thank you so much, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Delegate Kipke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you, Secretary, tell me as succinctly as you can what the process is now and what the process would be under this bill?
Sure. So the process would stay largely the same. And so the process is, and will continue to be, an agency submits a ticket through our intake process. So say, a good example, a live example I'll use is the Department of Labor wants to buy a software as a service platform for implementing paid family leave. So the Department of Labor puts in a ticket to Do It saying, does Do It have anything currently in your IT inventory? Do you have any products that could meet this need? In this case, we reviewed it. We said no, and it gets reverted back to them to look at the market for a solution, develop an RFP, etc. That process will continue. Another example, there might be an agency that puts in a ticket for, I think a good example, for the Department of the Environment wants to build a permitting system, and we say, and that's a big lift. We might say, like, yes, that's we want to be supportive of that. That's a great investment of the state's dollars. It's above $5 million. We greenlight that process through the MITP process. So we essentially say, yes, DBM, go forth and fund this. And then because, currently the amount is $1 million. So if the amount is above $1 million, we then assign an oversight manager to it. So someone who independently assesses whether that project is performing, whether that vendor is performing on time and on schedule for that agency. So the process will continue to be the same, but we're trying to make sure that with our limited oversight resources, we're assigning them to the projects that are significant to the state, or represent something, a critical technology that's new, like AI, that we want to have oversight around, and not something that's kind of standard operations and maintenance.
Thank you.
Can I move favorable on the amendment?
Okay, we have a motion on the amendment. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, indicate aye. Is anyone opposed to the amendment? Do I have a motion on the bill as amended?
Move favorable as amended? Second.
I have a motion and a second on the bill favorable as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed to the bill? Good. Secretary Savage and Ashley Lehman and Marcy Jacobs, thanks for joining us. And this will be on the committee vote roster for Friday.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Lindsay, should we go back to 55?
Sure. Sorry to mess up the numerical order for everyone.
No, you were absolutely correct in doing so.
House Bill 55, which coincidentally is also the other one that we have an amendment for today, establishes the Maryland Commission on Veterans and Military Families, which is staffed by the Department of Veterans Affairs. The commission must study and make recommendations for developing and implementing a statewide strategic plan to make Maryland the best state for veterans and military families, including legislative and budgetary recommendations, and identify key performance indicators to assess the quality of life for veterans and military families in Maryland relative to other states. The commission must report its findings and recommendations to the Governor and General Assembly by December 1st, 2024. I circulated an amendment from the sponsor on this bill, which is also the same amendment that was adopted on the Senate cross file on second reader yesterday on the Senate floor. The amendment adds members to the commission, including an individual who's a military spouse or representative of a military spouse advocacy group, an individual with experience in healthcare, whether somatic healthcare or mental health care, and an individual with experience in workforce development. And also says that the commission, while forming the recommendations and drafting the study required, consult with the Office of Military and Federal Affairs and the Maryland Military Installation Council in the Department of Commerce.
Okay.
Move the amendment.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the amendment. All in favor, say aye. Oh, I'm sorry. Delegate Kaiser.
Oh, wait, it's after the amendment.
Okay. Okay, all in favor of the amendment, say aye. Great, thank you. Delegate Kaiser.
I just had a question for Lindsay, or if someone is here from the VA. Have we done studies like this before? Do you know?
I can't speak to anything specific. If someone here from the VA is here, they might be able to speak to internal studies that they've done.
Christopher Arnold, can you answer that question?
Chairman, I'm actually with the Department of Defense, so we own folks from the time that they're recruits to when they're transitioning. We don't typically trample in the VA's garden. That being said, this is the Commission on Veterans and Military Families, which are absolutely separate lanes with separate concerns. And I will say, with respect to military spouses, the Maryland Military Installation Council recently appointed a subcommittee on military spouses, looking at issue areas such as licensure, dependent education, nutrition, housing, other areas, but we do not perceive that it would be duplicative of the auspices of this commission.
Thank you. Delegate Kaiser, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Delegate Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we just passed this amendment, but I looked in the committee testimony. Does this amendment address any of the concerns that the Maryland Hospital Association had, or NAMI Maryland?
I would consider it to generally address it. If anyone's here from those organizations, they can speak more specifically to it. MHA had suggested a representative with experience in workforce development and a representative with experience in healthcare. So that's covered by the amendments. They had also said the commission should explore how to reduce barriers to education and careers to help service members and their families transition into civilian roles. That's not specifically covered by the amendment, but certainly not precluded from the general, coverage that the commission might be looking at. NAMI had requested a representative from their organization by name, but because they deal with mental illness and the amendment is covering that with the reference to an individual with experience in healthcare, whether somatic healthcare or mental health care, could be seen to be addressing that concern. The letter of information from the ARC of Maryland also had suggested a military spouse, that they add a military spouse member with a disabled child because they advocate for people with disabilities. That's also not specifically referenced with regard to the new member who is a military spouse, but again, that member could be a military spouse who has a disabled child. It's just not specified there.
Perfect. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Delegate Chisholm. So Lindsay, this doesn't specifically include NAMI, but it has a category that would include them, or someone that
it could potentially include them, depending on who is actually the person who's added in that role.
Okay, we've already moved the amendment. Is there any other discussion on the bill? Do I have a motion on the bill as amended?
Move the bill.
Thank you, Delegate Chisholm.
Second.
Okay, Delegate Johnson, thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of moving favorably on the bill?
Aye.
Is anyone opposed to moving favorably on this bill? Okay, thank you. Moving on to House Bill 133.
This is the Commission to Study African American Civil War Soldiers in Maryland. The bill establishes the commission. The commission must study the history of African American Civil War soldiers who fought for the Union Army in Maryland, including muster rolls, locations of services, and all distinguished honors and recognitions awarded, and make findings and recommendations regarding the funding, design, construction, and location of an appropriate memorial dedicated to the African American Civil War soldiers in Maryland. The State Archives staffs the commission, and the commission must report its findings and recommendations by December 1st, 2024 to the Governor and General Assembly. There are no amendments offered on this bill. There was a question raised during the bill hearing about adding sailors. The sponsor felt that that it wouldn't be appropriate to include that in this bill at this time.
Much to all of our regret, because we can't amend ourselves on as co-sponsors. Any discussion on this bill? Delegate Chisholm, since Delegate Kipke's not here, would you like to do the honors?
Move the bill.
Yes, thank you.
Second. Second.
Right. Motion and a second. All in favor of moving the bill favorably, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to the bill? Okay, excellent. We'll move on to House Bill 235.
And for Delegate Hill's benefit, we did 227 first because Secretary Savage was here. The House Bill 235 is also a departmental bill from Department of Natural Resources. The bill exempts the negotiation and execution of pay for success contracts by the Department of Natural Resources from most provisions of state procurement law. No amendment.
I see we have Dana Reese from the Department of National Resources here. Does anyone have any questions about the bill or any questions for Dana Reese? Seeing no questions, do I have a motion on the bill?
So moved.
Thank you, Delegate Kaiser.
Second.
I have a second from Delegate Johnson. Motion and a second to move favorably on the bill. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone- Is there anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Last bill, 289.
This bill prohibits state contracts from including specified provisions that generally restrict the power and rights of the state. If a contract includes a prohibited provision, the provision is void and the contract remains enforceable, as if it did not contain the provision. A state contract that includes a prohibited provision is governed by and must be construed in accordance with state law, regardless of any term or condition to the contrary within the contract. The bill applies prospectively only and may not be applied to or interpreted to have any effect on or application of contracts that are executed before its effective date or to renewals or extensions of those contracts. There are no amendments.
We have Arthur Rose and Janet Forville here. Thank you for joining us. Are there any questions for the advocates? Okay, Delegate Hill.
Move the bill.
Second.
Okay, Delegate Hill moves the bill. Delegate Kaiser seconds. All in favor of moving favorably? Oh, Delegate Chisholm.
Chair.
Yeah, I just have one quick question. I had some questions that I understood why, University of Maryland wanted, but the Associated Builders and Contractors were opposed to this bill. And then I was told that they had changed their opposition, but I never got feedback. Does anybody on here know if they ever gave us feedback? I know Bruce Periano was
We did
representing them.
we did check in with
Do you know
Bruce
if that was
Periano
ever
following-
satisfied?
Yeah, we checked in with Bruce Periano following the bill hearing, and all of his initial concerns were resolved during the bill hearing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. So we have a motion and a second. Delegate Shalega.
Yeah, I'd like to, I don't know if we can hold this bill, we're early on, but I'd like to get answers on the ABC opposition to this bill. So we can find out if their concerns were resolved. I mean, we're 3 weeks into session. I don't know if you would entertain that.
Oh, certainly, any delegate can hold the bill. So there's Delegate Kaiser.
No, I was just going to add to that, to Delegate Shalega. My understanding is that after the hearing, the lobbyist who was there on behalf of ABC realized it wasn't exactly what they thought it was. And I think their absence today suggests something, but obviously a special order is never a bad thing. So I think you'll find out they're fine with the bill.
Yeah, I think you're right, Delegate Kaiser, but we have plenty of time, so let's make sure.
We certainly do. Mr. Rose, Ms. Forville, thanks you for joining us. We're going to have to come back to this bill next week.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the work before our subcommittee today. So I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'll see
Thank
you in committee.